in this next module, we'll be exploring the nature versus nurture controversy. And what does it mean when we say that sex and gender are two different things? So basically, our sex is our biologically structured thing. It has to do with our chromosomes. Which one is which? X is men? No, XY is men. And the tail hangs down.
Yes.
Yes. And XY is, XX is women, but then there's also an XXY. And we'll be presenting some interesting videos on intersexuality. But basically, the difference between sex and gender is the sex is the biological part, and the gender is our socially constructed sense of what is masculine and what is feminine. And those things don't always have to be the same. So we can have a female person in bodies such as mine who has masculine communication characteristics. And we could have a male person in a body such as yours who might have feminine communication characteristics. And the other thing we're going to talk about in the next chapter is a lot of these other kinds of terms. So what are some of them that we need to explore?
Well, there's gender jargon
Mm-hmm.
that's out there, and it's interesting how those terms have changed over history.
Mm-hmm.
Chick in a certain period of time in the 60s was referred to a woman, and now it might be referred to that, but some people may not be familiar with how that term used to be used. They might just see a baby chicken as the term, so we see that's changed. For me, it's interesting to look at the sexual orientation terms
Mm-hmm.
that have morphed over the years. Gay,
Yeah, that's changing.
homosexuality, where there was a negative connotation attached to them for many, many years, and it was hidden.
I remember in the schoolyard, kids used to call each other faggots, and then they would defend with, oh, well, that's just a bundle of sticks.
Right?
Do you know where that term actually comes from?
I don't.
Actually, I think it evolved from the other thing for fag is a cigarette.
Yes, I knew that.
And then, so I think gay men were probably smokers before, and so it came from that. And then it evolved into a derogatory term.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you remember, I used the LGBT terminology in order to kind of group particular culture,
Mhm.
folks together, and it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, transsexual, and there was a news broadcaster that was talking and had that listed on the screen, and that there are other, if you will, categories that could be placed into that, but what they've done is they've just used that because it's still more of an overview of the entire culture and whatnot. But those terms by themselves have changed over the years, and the transgender and the transsexual terminology that was brought in, those used to be in the gay and lesbian community was somewhat outcast.
Mhm.
Just like individuals that were deaf or hard of hearing, once they got a cochlear implant, they were outcast by the deaf community.
Hmm.
And it was the same idea, is that transgendered and transsexuals used to be an outcast of the gay and lesbian. And now we've decided that, that we're all human beings, and we just thought that it was more inclusive
Mhm.
type to bring that.
Well, and as we'll see in some of the videos that we might present to our students, these things are changing so rapidly that maybe in the future we won't even have these terms. The other term that is brought up is intersex, and intersex is someone who's hermaphroditic. There are actually 1% of our population has an XXY chromosome, which means that they're born with characteristics of men and or women And depending on how it all plays out, they might, as they reach puberty, make an organic transition from one gender to the other, or they're just generally biologically less defined. And historically, that was something that was thought to be something that needed to be corrected
Yes.
into
Mhm.
male or female, and people were making choices for their children
Yep.
and not telling their children.
Yep.
And now that still occurs, but there's beginning to be more understanding that that's not an illness, it's not a problem. People can be healthy and have a different sexual, biological display, shall we call it. But again, it's gonna take time for people to accept some of these differences that we haven't traditionally understood over time.
Yeah, and I don't see myself as one or the other or whatever. I'm a blending of a lot of different things, and I find it interesting when I disclose who I am to someone and the response is somewhat shocked and say, "Wow, I couldn't tell." Well, I don't wear a sandwich board that I'm a
Mhm.
gay male, but if someone asks, I'm not going to hide that anymore. But I just find that interesting that there's still that association with being gay or being lesbian or bisexual, that there's a certain look that should go along
Mhm.
with it as well, or behaviors
Mhm.
that go along with it as well. Because I express masculine and feminine qualities at various different times.
Yeah, and so do I. And sometimes that gets me into trouble because people still make assumptions about what a female, how they should be communicating and how a male should be communicating. And so we'll discover that more in the language part of our course. And the other thing I think that's pertinent to this discussion is that the media is changing our understanding of these things. So we're now seeing the more gay characters that are defying stereotypes in the media. So in the section where we talk about media communication, we'll take a look at that as well.